Yo, tuned in, it's that time again. Welcome to the show under the bright zen. Just another messenger bringing the news with the beat in your soul. Let's light up these views. We're diving deep, no time for snooze. Grab your headphones, let me share the clues. In a world so loud, where voices collide, we find the rhythm, let the truth be our guide. Hit that play button, feel the vibe. Every second counts, let's take that ride. From stories untold to laughs we share. Just another messenger, we're always there. It's a jam, just sit back and unwind. With our flow and our style, it's one of a kind. Life's a mix, just like a DJ spins. We serve you the truth where the journey begins. It's a jam, we're all in this together. Sound waves linking us, no matter the weather. Just another messenger, we keeping it tight. With every single drop, we rise and ignite. Yeah.
Good day. I'm your host, Tamara L., and welcome to another installation of Just Another Messenger, where we raise the situational urgency and consciousness regarding today's current events. We'll dive deep into the historical past by examining the philosophies, legal system, and political decisions that continues to influence our daily lives. So please join the conversation during the episode. Your comment matters. Hit the subscribe, share, and like button to be a part of more thought-provoking conversation in the future. You wouldn't want to miss it. And don't forget to visit our website at www.JustAnotherMessenger.com that connects you to all our social feeds, online merch store, and our link to support the work via Cash App at $JustAnotherMessenger. So let's get started. All right. Good evening. Let's get started here. We have a jam-packed session for you this evening, and let's take a pause. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take a pause from all the bombs that's going on out in the Middle East. So as the world watched the U.S.-Israel versus the Iran war, I mean, it's being watched like a final round of March Madness of 2026. The reclassified Black Americans must be prepared for the next wave of the pen war with the United States. Now, you will not see bombs dropping with that. That is a pen and paper war that's going to take place. That's dealing with the birthrights of the 14th Amendment that has been placed on hold as of yet due to these wars that are going on. So just printed and executive orders that were signed by Donald Trump. You know, in order to be prepared, you must know the playbook of the imperialism upon a nation of people that's been subjected for usurpation for almost 250 years. Now, they told you that identity starts with what you see. Now, but history says it started before that, before language, before law, before even your first breath. Now, it starts in the womb. Now, it's the gene that defines Genesis in the book, in the Bible, and it's all, which means the beginning. Now, long before modern debates about race, citizenship, and classification, there was a doctrine, a rule, and a system. Now, one that didn't just define people. Now, what it did, it assigned them. It assigned them in a category called Partus Sequitur Ventrem, and that means follow the womb, follow the belly. Now, that law, it codified birth into a status, a lineage, and identity into politics. Now, tonight, we're going to be pulling back the curtain, such as in The Wizard of Oz, on a framework that shaped generation and still applies today. And this started from colonial Virginia to erase indigenous identities to the legal battle still unfolding. As I said, now this just isn't about history. No, this is not history. Your history is your today. It is taking place today. This is design that took place back in 1600 and still affects us as of 2026. And as you will see the pattern, you'll understand why it was never just about race, and it was about control. the controllable people, and not just the first. I'm just not going to be the first to tell you, because I'm your host, Tamara L. with Just Another Messenger. And what we're going to do, we're going to break all this information down so that we can be prepared once the war comes back, the pen and paper war comes back to the United States. So before we get started, let's hold tight. All right. Want to thank all our people for coming in, and also want to remind you how to also stay in touch with us throughout our journey of building up this platform here. And you can do that by subscribe, share, and like on our YouTube page at Just Another Messenger, as well as follow us on X at JAM _404 podcast. And if you are someone you know would like to be a part of a show, please send a nice friendly email to JustAnotherMessengerPodcast at gmail.com. And please, thank you in advance for supporting the show. And also, if you'd like to continue to support the show, you can do that via our Cash App at $ Just Another Messenger. Now, I know we once were on every week, but we have other obligations that are bombarding our time constraints. And also, so we're definitely want to get back to that. But in the interim, we are airing live every other Wednesday. So just wanted to make a note of that. And would like to thank those for coming in into our YouTube page, and those that are on my private Facebook page of Tamara L. Keep in mind that I cannot see your comments until after the show, and I do respond to those after the show. Thank those for coming in on YouTube. Hope all others can get on here so I can have a dialogue with you as the show is airing. So this is going to be some really good information. I know everyone have seen a lot of the effects of the war that is taking place between, it's like a beat up match between Israel and the United States versus Iran that is taking place. That can be quite overwhelming of what we're seeing out there with this war. So, but however, we forgot that before that war went into effect, there was other wars that was taking place between Israel and Palestine. And you also had wars that was taking place between Ukraine and Russia. Then you had wars that sparked up that happened at Venezuela, United States. You had a war popped up between El Salvador in United States. So Ecuador, United States. So you have a lot of things going on around the world, but you have to remember, with that still in place, there are some things that are placed on hold in the United States that we must be prepared for as a people. And that is the 14th Amendment argument with regarding birthright citizenship. And you also have the ICE war that is taking place with immigration. And we're going to highlight that. What does that mean to you as a misnomered Black American? What does that mean to you? How are you affected by the 14th Amendment? What does that mean to you? So we're going to now get into the understanding of that so we can be well prepared when all these things pop forward. And in order to do that, but what we have to do, we have to give our disclaimer before we do anything else. We have to give our disclaimer.
Just Another Messenger is a platform on YouTube committed to public education, historical awareness, cultural analysis, and transformative dialogue. All content is produced and presented under the protections of Section 107 of the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976, commonly known as fair use. This platform does not provide legal advice, statutory interpretation for individual cases, or counseling for any proceedings within United States jurisdictions operating under color of law. All information shared is for educational, informational, and discussion purposes only. Content presented by Just Another Messenger may include excerpts of copyrighted materials, including but not limited to images, audio, video, and written works, for the purposes of criticism, commentary, news reporting, scholarship, research, and public education. Such use is intended to be transformative, non-exploitative, and in service of expanding public understanding. We do not claim ownership of any third-party copyrighted material featured. All rights, credits, and recognitions belong to their respective original creators. If you are a copyright holder and have any questions or concerns regarding the use of your material, please contact us directly via email at JustAnotherMessengerPodcast@gmail.com for prompt review and resolution.
All right, and that is our disclaimer there. Now let's get into this. Make America Great Britain again. Let's keep in mind that Partus Sequitur Ventrem, the law that follows the womb. Let's look at how the crown, King James had granted the first charter in 1606. This is all the beginning. This is the crown's corporate patent to what we know today, which started as the Virginia Company of London, the Virginia Company of Plymouth. Now, this is what you call a charter, a license, and is authorized English settlement in North America. It laid the foundation for Jamestown in 1607 and established England's claim to Virginia, a massive region at the time. Now, this is what you call the legal birth certificate of the English America. And with this charter, it was chartered, which created a corporate control, then it absorbed between the crown control. So first by a company, then by a king. And you have to ask yourself, why does this matter? This matter because the land was treated as granted authority and not a mutual agreement between nations that were already settled on the land. Now, indigenous nations were never recognized as equal sovereigns in these charters, which means, they was considered just another party upon the land. Now, these documents also became the legal backbone that what you see today as land claims, governance, as well as control system. And these control system lives on today through the United States government control. Now, as we also, you're going to see here before you see what you call the colonial Virginia flag. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit, and as you can see, that is the British American flag that's being held at that time. Now, this is prior to 1776. I'm not going to go, this is prior to 1776. This is what you call the British American flag. And as you can see of the British American flag, this is the colonial Virginia flag that shows that it's under British control, under the Crown of England. All right. Now, let's look at the status. Let's look at the colonial status of the people. Now, this is prior to 1776. Let's look at that, the status of this. As you can see, the people were, number one, they were subjects of the crown, which means all colonists of the 13 colonies, except enslaved people and many indigenous nations, which means there are, as I stated, there are already nations, well settled, governing nations already settled on the land. So the status of the colonial status was subjects of the crown. You had freedmen or free inhabitants. You had indentured servants. Now, these were considered your contracted laborers, and they usually worked between, they had a contract, usually about 4 to 7 years, and they were not considered free and they were not considered enslaved. Now, a indentured servant was someone who wanted to immigrate, which means leave out of the country of their mother, which was England. So the king granted them permission to leave out of the England and to come into the colony, immigrate into the colony as is indentured servant status, and to be able to work and help build up the colony, not America, not the area that were already of other nations that was in operations, the colony of Virginia. And they had to work for 4 to 7 years out of their contract. Now, and you also had what you call enslaved people, which means that the king sent over people that were already enslaved up under British territory. They were chattel slavery under British command that were sent over to work on the colony field. They was emptied out jails, mental asylums, people that was not working there. They put them on boats, sent them to the colony, and they was considered enslaved people in chattel slavery, and they worked the colony. You also had free blacks. You had free blacks that was in the crown colony. In those free blacks, they paid their own way. They didn't. They did not use the king's money or finances to finance their journey. They called it adventure. An investment. That was a separate category. Those people did not come into what is known today Ellis Islands. Free blacks, they ported into the area in New York, the Duke of York territory, um, in the port that's in Manhattan. They went to a totally separate port. So when you say Slavics came into Ellis Island, you have to define which Slavics, what status. So you also have free blacks that chartered their own adventure and investor project over to the America, but their boat went into the Manhattan ports. And you had indigenous nations that were also of Indians that were governed by treaties that often violated them. But let me read this. This is an excerpt of a book that was purchased in the National Convention Center years ago, and I just so happened to find it. All right, and it reads, it's a fun fact, and it reads that a majority of the colonists were English or of English descent. Nearly all spoke English. Second in numbers were the Germans in Pennsylvania, the Dutch in New York, and the Irish and Scottish Irish was settled to some extent throughout all of the colonies. I thought it was very important fun facts to know. Now, this is a really good one that's really going to make you tickle. It's a witty Frenchman at the time observed that the people of England reminded him of a barrel of their own beer, from on the top, dredges on the bottom, but clear and sound in the middle. It was a fact that the greater part of the immigrants, which means settled into, who settled early Americans, was from that energetic industrial middle class. As such, none of the colonies had a title aristocrat holding land. So if you didn't hold land then, you don't hold land now. The colonies had men of intelligence and wealth, but no lords. The indigenous nations, they hold the titles of the lords, which means the keeper of the bread. I'm going to show you that. They were learned and influential clergymen, but no bishops. They were not of the crown. Now, I thought that was a really good fun fact to find there. And we're going to continue on understanding this. Now, this goes right into the heartbeat of Partus Sequitur Ventrem, which means follow the belly, follow the womb. But you have to keep in mind, before 1776, people were not citizens, all right, of the British crown. They were not citizens. They were subjects, property, labor, or sovereigns, outsiders in the case of indigenous nations. So the outsiders were considered the indigenous nations. Now, what this did, it created identity was assigned and the rights was tiered, in which created status was often decided at birth. So Partus Sequitur Ventrem is a British common law that was enacted into the colony of Virginia. Now look at this, how the law changed everything. Let's look at this. Let's go ahead and strip this down. Now in 1962, colonial Virginia passed a law that flipped English common law straight on its head. Virginia built its first maternal hereditary pipeline for bondage. It didn't build it, it literally brought it over from across the water. And it's follow the belly. Partus Sequitur Ventrem. And it means a child's condition followed the condition of the mother. Now, what this did, where it separated itself, it broke from the usual British common law presumption that status followed the father, and it made enslavement hereditary through the womb. And why did they do this? Why was this law? Because as you can see, they charted over in 1609 into the colony. And in 1662, something happened where they changed the hereditary line from the father to the mother. Well, what took place was there was, you know, um, mixing, inbreeding, mixing going on, where you had a lot of the Slavic British men of different statuses that were, some were free, some was out of their contracts. So you had these you had what you call British Englishmen that were mating with the indigenous melanated woman, and these children was being birthed. So it was like, these children are going to, since they have the law at the time was the status of the father, these children was being born free, which was reducing their enslavement population. They was like, oh, no, 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 no. And these children were now being, those children that was born in that time was now being entitled to all its free rights of its father. So they had to put a stop to that, in which they pulled over Partus Sequitur Ventrem, follow the belly, which is the law that they enacted in 1662. Now what this did, instead of identity following the father, it followed the mother now. Now, what means that if the mother was enslaved, now the child was now enslaved. If the mother was classified, the child inherits that classification. So this wasn't accidental. This was definitely infrastructure. They had to find a way to keep the enslavement population at an optimum for mass productivity of their goods. Now you got to remember, they are a new nation now. They're a new colony. So they have to produce for their king. And it's a system that produces labor automatically. It locks status now into birth, and it turns women bodies into legal pipelines. Now, this is where slavery becomes self-sustaining, not by chains. Now, it's by code. It is truly codified into their system. Now, as you can see on the land, the indigenous nations, we're going to look at one of the indigenous nations called the Anishinaabe, the Confederacy. This is with the Iroquois Confederacy flag. And this is an area that's known today as in the New York region, because it's made up of 5 nations, 6 in the 6th nation that came in at that thereafter the forming of the flag and constitution was the Lenape, which is the area known today as Delaware. So you had the Seneca, you had the Cohooja, you had the Onondaga, you had the Tuscarora. So you had 5 nations that confederated and named themselves the Anishinaabe. The modern name is the Iroquois Confederacy, which means they 5 different nations confederated to, which create a federal body, but they all still had their nations operate independently. As you see, the states today have independent constitutions. Those various nations had their own nation constitution, and then they formed what you called a great binding law of peace, which is a federal constitution. Now, this is their federal constitution. This is their federal constitution here. Let me look at that. All right, let me move this because that can be in the way right there. Let me get something out the way. I just noticed something was up. All right, let's look at the federal constitution right here. Now, this is called the wampum number 44, which means agreement, which is the great binding law. Now, wampum 44 states that the lineal descent of the people of the 5 nations shall run in the female line. Women shall be considered the progenitors of the nation. They shall own the land and the soil. Men and women shall follow the status of the mother. Now, as I said earlier, it was well understood that there was nations that were already had governance rules and regulations on the land before the colonial settlements of the English descendants. You also, like you say, you had the Germans, the Dutch, the Irish, the Scots. Then you had the Spaniards to come in. So the already governance system. This is one of the governance systems of a confederation. There was many other confederations. You had the Mississippians confederations, the Illinoisans confederations. There's different type of federation, but I like to discuss the Great Binding Law. And the reason I like to discuss the Great Binding Law, because the Great Binding Law, the Anishinaabe Confederacy Constitution, the United States Constitution framework is derived from the Anishinaabe Iroquois Confederacy Constitution, because a lot of the framers sat with this nation and worked with this nation for its safety, such as through the 1778 Lenape Delaware Treaty. They also showed them the workings of governance. So you will see a lot of the United States Constitution is mirror right in alignment with the Anishinaabe Confederacy Constitution, the Great Binding Law of Peace. There's well settled documentations regarding that as well. So Ben Franklin, John Jay, a lot of those esquires, they sat with the chiefs and the lords of those nations and learned governance, because they did not learn governance with their king, because they were warring with their king and they wanted to separate. But one of the things they did not inherit from the Great Binding Law of Peace was the lineal descent, and the woman, the inheritance is through the woman womb. They took some of the elements from the king and they kept it the patriarch. So that's where you hear the word patriarch mean father, patriarch. Are you a patriarch? So that is where that comes from. Whereas, are you a matriarch? Matriarch means mother's rule. Patriarch means father rule. So that's why they like to stay within the patriarch system and stay away from the matriarch understanding of the inheritance is through the woman. All right. Now, I break this down in the episode 2. When we first got started with Just Another Messenger, we break this down. This is episode 2 called Anglo-American Agenda, Founding Fathers or Founding Thieves. You can find that over in our history section, our live section, on our YouTube page. So go and I go through a detailed description and show you the different treaties, the different connections between the Esquires and the Lenape treaties, as well as the Anishinaabe Confederacy and the alignment of that. So go check that out on our live. All right, let's get into the womb as a government system. Let's look at how the womb became a government system. Now, this deals with identity and status, and identity and status matters today of 2026. And at that time, it was assigned at birth, and it carries throughout generations legally, not divine. It lost its divinity during that period, and because of people of today do not understand who they are in their mother's womb, and they have threw the baby out with the bathwater in understanding of the Bible in the Genesis story, you lost your inheritance, but the inheritance must be restored back. So that means that status is inherited, rights are inherited, limitations are inherited. All right. So when you lose that, you inherit those limitations as well. So this goes from physical control to biological governance. That's why I say status, nationality matters, because identity as can be assigned at birth, and they carry throughout the generation, as you said. So they don't need the state doesn't need to control you if it controlled your origin. If it continue to allow control your origin, it will continue to control you throughout your life cycles, your children life cycles, your children life cycles, because that cord is not, that fake cord is not severed. All right. So let's get in. The identity status become what you call administrative categories that are used in law, census records, as well as policy. It becomes codified in policy. And those identity status is Negro, colored, Black, African American, and Indian American. Now, Indian American is British created category. Now, which is a legal and administrative framework, like I said, to codify the status of a people. Now, in doing so, they erase the body, but they erase the name, but keep the body. How do they do that? This is how we get into the real understanding of this, and it becomes very, very dangerous, because they have what you call the Virginia Racial Integrity Act, where Virginia just didn't regulate people, it reclassified them. And how did it do that? Let's look at how they did that. It did that through what you call birth of a race. Now, this is an example where they created what you call birth certificates through the birth of a race. And this information is codified and securitized. When I say securitized, now this is what we get into understanding. I talk about this quite often. It's called the Buttonwood Agreement. And the Buttonwood Agreement is tied to the stock market. And the stock market is called the Securities Exchange. And it's where the Buttonwood Agreement created it is the platform, it's the contractual agreement of brokers for the creation of the Security Exchange Commissions. It is the foundation of that. And in doing so, they set the prices of the market for competitive competition. So which means they're what that is what you call the masters. Became the masters of the natural resources in the land to control the profit and loss of that. So as you can see today, one of the things in the war, the main resource that is taking place is the war of the resource of oil. Now, if you do not have jurisdiction and territorial control of an area that is rich in resources, and you're lacking in finances, and you're becoming a nation or a corporation that's almost at the brink of insolvency, it would make sense to war against an opponent, another nation that have vast resources. Unfortunately, that is actually not the way of working things out, nation to nation way, but that has been the way of the United States government. And they have the original permission slip for doing so. It's the doctrine of discovery. So the doctrine of discovery creates this permission to be able to go throughout different lands of nations that are not a part of Christendom. And now it's not okay. We're not using Christendom as an excuse. We're using a different religion as an excuse. We're using Judaism. We're using the ways of the Jews now to go in war and take the resources to be able to have now resources for your nations, because your nation is becoming or is now an insolvent nation. So to erase the body, erase the name and keep the body, this was also done by ways of birth certificate. These are reclassification tools done by birth certificates, marriage licenses, and census records. Now, these are reclassification tools that took place along the way. Now, whereas indigenous people at that time, they were removed as Indians. So indigenous nations, they removed their names through war in the pen after the warring, and you subdue their nation. There's a reclassification to take place where they're now removed as Indian and they are rewritten as colored to African now, and now African American. This is where you say the pen is mightier than the sword, and as scholars call this is what is called paper genocide. This is the paper genocide that still takes place in 2026. So it's not killing the body, but it's a continuation of erasing the identity of a people that was first in line, first in time, custodians of the land. All right. Now, this is the American Indians. These are the American Indians that are talked about. So the real American Indians story must be reclassified, must be restored back to its original origin. Now, in doing so, as I said earlier, something was laid down. The 14th Amendment argument of birthright citizenship was laid down for these wars to take place, to be able to go out and get finances and restore resources and territorial control. So as that is taking place, the fight has not went away with the true American Indians, the true people, the indigenous, the indigenous, the Moors of this land. So that argument is still pending. That pen fight, that pen war is still pending, and we must be prepared for that. Once it comes back to this land, we must be prepared for that battle. All right. So because the 14th Amendment did not say Indians are black. I'm going to say that again. The 14th Amendment did not say Indians are black. It states Indians not taxed. And that's in Section 2 of the 14th Amendment. That means they're not included, not fully included, and not fully excluded. Now, here's where people get things twisted with this, because even though it say the 14th Amendment did not say Indians are black, but what it did, it left the category of people that has destiny swapped with the true indigenous people of the land. It created a destiny swap. Okay, what do we do with this category of people that came to this land by way of the Bering Strait? What do we call these people? What do we do with them? Because we have now removed the indigenous, indigenous people from their territory, from their nation. But what do we do with these people that we allowed to come in by way of the Bering Strait? What do we do with them? Oh, we have to create a placeholder for them, because guess what? Remember, I read earlier that as such, none of the colonies had a title aristocrat holding land. Someone has to hold the land and be a placeholder. Maybe those people will rise back up and take their rightful place among society, and maybe they will not. But in the meantime, we have to create a placeholder. And who do we create a placeholder with? We created a placeholder with these people. We call them the pretendians. These are the people that came by way of the Bering Strait, and they landed into the different territories that the indigenous people that has now been reclassified as black, Negro, colored, African American. They settled in, they reserved themselves into the land of the people that was ran away. Let's just put it like that. And that's why I call reservationists. They are reserving your place. All right. So the pretendians. So this is a separate category, legal category that was created for them. And they call them natives. And a native person, a person of a federally recognized tribe. Now, this is interesting to get to know this because there was a case called Elk versus Wilkins. And Elk versus Wilkins confirmed that Native people were not automatic citizens. Native people are not citizens of the United States. They say we have put a category. They called them Native Americans. We placed a category for them because under British, now you got to remember this is under the United States have now moved into the United States being having jurisdiction control. Under the British colony coined the people that was already of nations. They coined them as Indians. So that's what a distinction lies at right there. So the Native Americans title under the United States jurisdiction, these were the descendants of the Siberians. They are the Native Americans. So they had to classify them. They said, okay, they were not automatically citizens of the U.S. jurisdiction. They're not citizens of ours. So, but what took place is they created a citizenship status for them. And this is called the United States subject category, right? This is the new category for under the United States. And this took place between the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. So they parked the all American natives born into the U.S. citizenship under the Indian Citizenship Act, even though they are, you see, it's under because they are not the true Indians of the true category Indian were the true indigenous nation tribes that were fought against and ran off their land, ran out of their nations. Their nations were absorbed into the United States jurisdiction. But the Native Americans, they allowed them to have a dual political status, such as a U.S. citizen, also a citizen of their tribal nation. This is very important to understand this because this create a pattern. This create patterns of continue to hide the true indigenous people of the nation. It creates what you call indigenous erasure. And it continues to erase. So the real truth is there is not federally codified as a name doctrine after 1776. So that's the real truth about that. So as we get into, let's look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump stated in a congressional hearing, he said, they don't look like Indians to me. Let's hear what he said about that.
Tell you what, if you look at some of the reservations that you've approved, you, sir, in your great wisdom have approved, I will tell you right now, they don't look like Indians to me. And they don't look like the Indians. Now, maybe we say politically correct or not politically correct. They don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like Indians to Indians. And a lot of people are laughing at it, and you're telling how tough it is, how rough it is to get approved. Well, you go up to Connecticut, and you look. Now, they don't look like Indians to me, sir.
Now, yeah, this is a 1993. This is a much younger Donald J. Trump. 1993, he went before Congress because there was a dispute with the about some casino that was being built in the area, and they was only giving the casinos out to people that was in classification. They was reserving that land, and it was only going to be reserved. You had the people that the Native Americans, aka Indians, were only classified to hold and reserve that land for the casino. Of course, at that time, the Trump you see today, the love a good fight. The Trump in 1993 went to a good fight, even though he lost the fight regarding the casinos being built and the status that the category just as, DEI. He felt that DEI was a placeholder for aka African Americans being able to obtain jobs. So he's eliminating DEI, moving that away. Donald Trump is the type of person he feels things are supposed to be done on merit. Well, it's such like the oxymoron, because if that was the case, Donald Trump wouldn't even be president, because there's a lot of things on merit that will make him ineligible to be in that position. So we're not going to go there. So as you can see at this time, this is one of the arguments, and we're going to replay that, where he said, hey, they don't look like Indians to me. Let's do that again.
What if you look at some of the reservations that you've approved, you, sir, in your great wisdom have approved, I will tell you right now, they don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like the Indians. Now, maybe we say politically correct or not politically correct. They don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like Indians to Indians. And
okay, did you catch that? He said they don't look like Indians to me. Let's go back to the same. He said they don't look like Indians to me. He's talking about they. He said they don't look like Indians to me. These are the days he's talking about. And he said, and they don't look like Indians to Indians. This is the Indians that Donald Trump is referring to. He's talking about the indigenous people, and they don't look like Indians to Indians. So this has been well understood who are the true indigenous people of this land belongs to. He said they don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like, and he's talking about they, the pretendians that we call today. They don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like Indians to Indians. Let's make that clear. Let's make that very clear. All right. So, as we look at the Virginia flag of 1776 and the present flag, you can see that they have very similarity that moves over. You have the original stripes that come from the British American flag. They still maintain that in 1776. And then as you can see, they still have the stars, the 13 stars. And then as they moved over to it, they filled it out with the blue, and they kept the person trampling on top of the person. Don't trample on me. So that's where you see a lot of that at, even with the snake. So those flags, now, if they maintain the spirit of the flag, that means they maintain the spirit of the law. Now, we have to understand that. Now, so the real truth about that is what happened after 1776. Now, we have to ask ourselves, did the law of Partus Sequitur Ventrem end once the United States became a nation in 1783 through the Treaty of Paris? Now, I want you to go look that up and read the Treaty of Paris. Now, I also want you to take time to read the 1778 Treaty of Delaware, the Lenapes. Read those two together, and you'll see, because I'm going to give you an opportunity to even think about this. If we're dealing with birthright citizenship, and we're dealing with also the 14th Amendment questions that are in play, did the law of Partus Sequitur Ventrem end once the United States became a nation in 1783 through the Treaty of Paris? Which means the United States did not become a nation in 1776. They became a nation in 1783. So this celebration they think they're about to have in July the 4th, the 1776, is a false celebration, because they were not even a nation at that time. But the answer to this question is no. The answer to this question is absolutely no. They did not end Partus Sequitur Ventrem. Follow the belly. Why I say that? Now, it may not be federally codified now as that name doctrine today. It's not codified as Partus Sequitur Ventrem. It's not codified as that, but it's fully operational through state law, and it's protected and reinforced by federal systems, and it's relied upon for the entire slavery economy to continue to exist as of today, 2026. So in practice, it functioned like a national system without a single national statute, which means it continued to live. So the real insight is this is not about one law. It's about a multi-layered system of control where it starts off biological through birth, follow the belly, follow the womb. And now it's in a legal citizenship status. Black, what are you? Black, colored, Negro, African American. It's codified legal through citizenship status. And then it goes into administrative records, census, birth certificate, social security card, everything else that requires administrative census records. So this is what you call a multi-layer system that has gave birth from Partus Sequitur Ventrem, because it controlled the womb, it controlled the classification, and now it controls the identity of a people. Now, what you have to do, there must be a Genesis restoration. There must be a Genesis restoration that takes place. And in Genesis is the beginning. There must be a rebirth of the beginning that takes place. How we do this? Because names, they were used to classify us. But our sovereignty isn't reclaimed by renaming yourself. It's restored through lineage, documentation, and recognition by the nation you come from, your mother's womb. That's where nationality matters at. That's the fight that's taking place, where Iran would rather die to the end and not lose their sovereignty and be usurped through identity classification. So we must get into the homework. We must get into the books, get into the records, of your mother. Who's your mother? Who's your mother? Who's your mother? You must get into the lineal descent, not this story that everyone came off a boat. We all know that story has been demystified. Everyone is not from the continent of Africa, because they cannot even define the country of within the continent that one is from. So if that's the case, why haven't your people been able to restore you back to your home country? Because everyone is not from the continent of Africa. Now, unless you're taking this all the way back to, now there's debates regarding, the understanding of the continent of Africa being the first out of the waters. How would you know? Because as far as I can go back, the records I've been able to go back with my grandmother, great grandmother, things, it still ties to the land. What does that mean, to be tied to the land? That is your inheritance. Because what happened is, if you're people who understand where you come from, you will know how to fight to keep it. You will know how to stand for it and not be against it and not give it up so easily. So you have to do your homework and get into the study of who's your mother. Who's your mother? Now, I've learned that because so many of us are doing the homework, they're putting up a lot of barriers at vital statistics. One of the barriers that we came upon was sometimes when you're trying to go layers deep, they're put things in place where the birth certificate can only be received to say if it's your grandmother, and which is your mother's mother. The birth certificate can only be received by the children of your grandmother. Okay, so what if your mother is deceased? You have to show all this documentation of that. You have to show your connection. But what if you're missing some information, and then once you're trying to obtain your grandmother's information, they want you to know who's your grandmother, mother, and who's your grandmother's father and things. So there's a lot of barriers that they have put in place. And then they have what you call restricted and unrestricted. Like the birth have to be within 100, after 125 years, then that birth certificate now become public. If it's less than 125 years, that birth certificate is private. So they just enacted a lot of this information because you have people such as myself and countless of others of us are digging into the records and obtaining our lineage. Because your lineage also, like I said, ties you back to the land. Because once you have that lineage, now you can go into the Bureau of Land Management and start looking for the land in which your family possessed at that time, and you can reclaim the land of your lineage descent. So they're putting a lot of barriers in place, but you have to be patient and do the homework, because the documentation beats any conversation. Is very important. So no one can tell you came off a boat. No one should be able to tell you came off a boat if they can't show you documentation of that boat you came off of, or your grandmother came off of, and how you're connected to that. If they can't show you that, you need to dismiss that boat conversation and start getting into doing the homework of your lineage and putting those pieces and puzzles together of that. Because once you're able now to have connect your lineage and your documentation, now you're able to now reclaim that land back for you, and that's your inheritance that was given. Because there's a beautiful thing that took place. Now there's a public law in their records that say that that the Bible, the word of God, they follow the word of God. So it's like the year of the Bible. So which means the scriptures of the Bible is covenants for judication, which means once you identify your lineage, once you identify your land, now you can look at Deuteronomy, and I think it talks about moving your neighbor's markers, because it was laid up for old time, which means your inheritance were laid up for you. And moving through reclassification is moving your marker, moving you off your land. You can reclaim that back. All right. So which means it helps you to recognize your nations. As you can see, there's a lot of battles that are taking place between the restoration of the different nations, because you have those placeholders of those pretendians in place, and they was preserving the name of our nations, even though they changed the name, the vernacular sound of it, into a more modern English, but they maintain the integrity of Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, and things of that nature. And they still have the operations of those governance in operations, but it's like they're de facto. Let's put it right there. They are de facto, which means that once all the lineage documentation, now you can go back and recognize the nation and go back and get in those governance seats and back into your rightful position of being first in time, first in law. All right. So that's the importance of restoration and nationality matters. And that's a process of that. The process is not someone drawing up a piece of paper through a religious organization and you just signing off on it. And you may not even have blood quantum ties or to some of these people, because you don't know what some of these people derived from. So you will know that by just sitting down talking to your mother, If your mother's not here, talking to a sister of the mother, aunt of the mother, someone of the mother to connect yourself. Now, even if you're adopted, you still have a mother. You came from the womb. You are still a part of a nation lineage, and it's important to do the work. So, wanted to get that out there because we're going to be faced with this pen and paper war that's going to come back, and you're going to have to decide as a people. You're going to have to decide that are you going to allow yourself to be reclassified into another category that will subject you to economic slavery. Got to remember, everything is done in 7 generations. The 7th generation is up for this colony. The 7th generation ends. That's the 7th generation of the colony ends this year. So, which means that you're going to be the one to write your own contract of enslavement because you didn't do the work to define who you are. That's why I wanted to take a break from the bombardment of the bombs that's going on and the killing, because it's already been prophesied that these wars are necessary for your soul salvation. So we're going to have to make this decision. Do you want your soul to be saved, or do you want to damn yourself for another 7 generations, your children's children? That's where it's at now. That's the next war. The decision is upon you, the people. Do you want to enslave yourself for the next 7 generations to come? So you're going to decide, are you going to let someone else hold a pen, or are you going to be the captain of your ship, and you're going to write your own decree for your liberation? So that's where it's going to be at. I want to make sure honors to all that's here. Good evening, honors to everyone that's here. And I hope, I'm not going to say I hope, there was a lot of work put into this. Please support the channel. I know it's every 2 weeks. Please support the channel through our, I'm going to put the information back up again. Support the channel through our Cash App so we continue to have more studies, continue to keep pushing this alternative media forward. This channel is not a mockingbird, it's a mission. It's an unlocking mission, and that's what we're here to do. An unlocking mission of the consciousness to remind us who we are. All right, continue to do that through our Cash App at $ just another messenger, and share this information. This information is very vital to get out. Share this information to someone you know, to go subscribe to on our YouTube page to Just Another Messenger. Also, follow us on X at jam_404 podcast. I will be moving a lot of our content over to Rumble. We are heavily, when I say heavily, we are heavily censored on YouTube. So it's on, and we're not even a large platform at all. But when the message is right and true, of course, they don't want it to go out. So, but that's okay. Continue to share. And also, we're going to start bringing on some people, have these great conversations, but we want to have great conversations of solutions. No talk. I'm definitely not just about talking birds, preaching to the choir. No, this is about viable solutions for liberation. This is about viable, getting things done, how it can be done, why it has to be done this way. That's what it's about with Just Another Messenger. So I had to remind myself of that. So yes, we'd like to bring people onto the show to Just Another Messenger podcast at gmail.com. See, I'm blinking already, so I know they're trying to blink it out. But I want to definitely thank you for tuning in today. As I said, as we move forward, we're not every Wednesday. We're every other Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So support the Cash App. You can send an email, and until then, we'll see you 2 weeks from now. So if that's around the holiday, the Egyptian New Year, it'll be the week after. But I'll keep you abreast of our errand. So until then, have a great evening.